Welcome back to Tom's Story. I never would have guessed that at 44, I'd be intimate with a woman 2 decades younger, especially not as an act of vengeance. Life has a funny way of surprising you, sometimes with a brutal twist. But before I jump ahead, let me rewind and introduce myself. I'm Sam, a middle-aged, ordinary guy, nothing particularly noteworthy, at least until everything fell apart. I was married to Melissa for 16 years. We met in our late 20s, back when I was more idealistic and less gray. She had this radiant energy, making everyone feel special, and honestly, I was drawn to that. It made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Our marriage was, well, it was a marriage. Not perfect, but whose is? We had our share of disagreements, but I never thought they were insurmountable. We weren't overly affectionate, and yes, we argued, but we always reconciled, or so I believed. Now, I realize I was just a naive husband, assuming everything would work out if we persevered. Then there's Jason, my supposed best friend. We've been close for almost 20 years, ever since we worked together. He'd been through a devastating loss. His wife died in a car accident about 10 years prior, leaving him with his 10-year-old daughter, Emma. I remember how shattered he was. He was barely functioning that first year. Melissa and I were there for him, especially Melissa. She became a mother figure to Emma, almost as if she was trying to fill the void left by Jason's wife. Emma practically grew up at our house. She called me Uncle Sam and eventually felt comfortable confiding in me about things she wouldn't tell her dad, you know, teenage drama, boys, all that stuff. Jason seemed grateful, or at least I thought so. We lived nearby, so they were always popping over unannounced, like family. It was normal. Hell, Jason was practically a permanent fixture in our home. But I never suspected that this familiarity would morph into something so sinister. One day, everything imploded. I wasn't supposed to be home. I was at work when I was suddenly struck by a sharp stomach pain. My boss, a decent guy, told me to take the rest of the day off and go home. So I did, thinking I'd just sleep it off. But I never made it to my bed. When I pulled into my driveway, Jason's car was there, again. Not unusual, he often left it there when he came over. But something felt off. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but I had an uneasy feeling. The front door was locked. That was strange. Melissa never locked the door during the day, especially if we had company. So I used my keys, went inside, and it was eerily quiet. Then I heard it, faint at first, but unmistakable, moans, gasps, and muffled words. My heart stopped. My mind couldn't process it. No, this can't be happening. But it was. I acted on instinct. My legs carried me upstairs, faster than my brain could keep up. I walked down the hallway, each step feeling like I was descending into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet on the way up. I knew someone was going to pay. When I reached the bedroom door, I hesitated for what felt like an eternity, and then I pushed it open. I was unprepared for what I saw. My wife of 16 years was straddling my best friend. They froze, saw me standing there with the bat, and the color drained from their faces. Melissa's mouth hung open, but no words came out. Jason scrambled off the bed. I didn't say anything. I walked up to him and swung the bat hard, cracking the wood on the floor. He flinched. I wasn't aiming for him, yet. I didn't need to say anything. The betrayal was etched on their faces. Melissa, ever the manipulator, finally found her voice. Sam, wait. Don't do anything stupid. Please, let's talk. After that I dropped the bat and punched Jason squarely in the face, again and again. The third punch split his lip. Melissa screamed, trying to pull me off him, but I was beyond caring. Jason finally spat out, eyes wide with panic, Sam, it's not what it looks like. How long? I growled, my voice shaking. How long has this been going on? Neither of them could answer. Pathetic. I didn't wait for their excuses. I left. I grabbed the bat, walked out the front door, and smashed the windshield of Jason's car. I dented the hood, broke the side mirrors. All I could think was, how the hell did it come to this? I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first, but then it hit me, I needed a drink. No, I needed to get hammered. So I drove to the bar, the one place where things always made sense, where the world didn't feel so twisted. I walked into the bar, still clutching the bat like it was my last line of defense against the chaos my life had become. The regulars were there, lost in their own problems. I sat down at the counter without a word, but I could feel their eyes on me. It wasn't every day you saw a guy like me show up at noon, especially looking like I had just come back from war. "Whiskey," I muttered, not even glancing up at the bartender. I didn't need to. He already knew. Gary was his name, a good guy. He'd seen a lot over the years. He'd been working at that bar for as long as I could remember, always there with a wise crack or a shoulder to lean on, depending on what you needed. He didn't ask questions, just poured the whiskey. I downed it in one gulp. The burn barely registered. By the time I ordered my third glass, Gary leaned in, raising an eyebrow. "Everything all right, Sam? Not like you to show up here before the sun's down." His voice was calm, like he'd heard 1,000 sob stories, but there was a hint of concern. Nobody had ever seen me like this. I laughed, a short, bitter laugh that sounded more like a bark. "You ever walk in on your wife, with your best friend?" Gary's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't look surprised. He let out a low whistle. "That's rough, man. Rough. Rough doesn't even begin to cover it," I muttered, swirling the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. I stared at it like it might give me some kind of answer, like it could somehow make sense of everything. But it didn't. Nothing did. I don't know why I told him everything. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe I just needed to get it out of my system before it consumed me. But I told him everything. I told him about walking in on them, the look on their faces, the sound of the bat cracking against the floor. I told him about smashing Jason's car, about the punches, about how I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Gary listened, didn't interrupt. When I was done, he patted me on the shoulder, his hand heavy but comforting. "That's a shitty situation, man. No other way to put it." I nodded, staring at the empty glass. Shitty didn't even cover it. "But listen," Gary continued, leaning in. "The main thing is not to break down. Don't let them win." I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "What would you do if you were me?" Gary didn't miss a beat. "Well, I'd probably do what you're doing now, get drunk off my ass, maybe break something. Hell, let's make that official." He grabbed a glass, poured himself a whiskey, and clinked it against mine. "To shitty friends and cheating wives." I smirked. It was the first genuine emotion I'd felt all day. We both downed our drinks. Then he set his glass down. "I want revenge," he said. "The kind that leaves them with nothing. Take everything from them, your wife, your so-called friend. Make them regret the day they ever crossed you." I stared at him. His words hit me harder than the whiskey. Revenge. It was what I wanted, wasn't it? To make them suffer, to tear their lives apart the way they'd torn mine. "I'll do it," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm going to take them down. Leave them with nothing." Gary gave me a nod of approval, but his face softened. "Just be smart about it, Sam. You're a good guy. Don't let this turn you into something you're not." By the time the hours had passed, I was so drunk I couldn't see straight. I didn't know how I was going to get home, and honestly, I didn't care. I was too lost in my thoughts, in the haze of whiskey and rage. Gary must have seen it. Before I could even think about stumbling out to my car, I don't remember much after that, just stumbling through the front door of my house, the place where it all started. It felt so empty, like a hollow shell of the life I used to have. I collapsed onto the couch, still fully dressed, and passed out. The next morning, I woke up with the worst hangover of my life. My head felt like it had been run over by a truck, my mouth was dry as hell, and every muscle in my body ached. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the realization of what had happened, what I had done. By the time I crawled off the couch that afternoon, my head was still pounding, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I knew what I had to do next. The divorce wasn't just going to happen by itself. I needed to start taking action. I grabbed my phone and called the first divorce lawyer I could think of, a guy named Rick. I'd met him a few years back at a work event. We talked here and there, and I knew he handled ugly situations like mine. "Rick, it's Sam. I need to talk about a divorce," I said flatly, not in the mood for small talk. "Damn, Sam, I didn't expect this call from you," Rick said, his voice somewhere between surprised and sympathetic. "All right, give me the rundown." I gave him the basics: Melissa, the infidelity, how long we'd been married. I didn't hold back on the details. Not with Rick. He needed to know everything if I was going to make sure Melissa didn't walk away with a damn thing. When I hung up, I felt a little better, just a little. That's when I saw it, Melissa's laptop sitting on the dining room table. Her work laptop. She had some big presentation the next day, she'd been talking about it for weeks. It was the type of thing that could make or break her standing in the company, and I knew how much she'd been stressing over it. And then it hit me, a way to take my revenge, to make her life just a little bit harder. I sat down and opened the laptop, skimming through her files until I found the presentation. I wasn't some tech wizard, but I knew enough to make a few changes that would screw things up for her. I scrolled through the slides, trying to figure out where to strike. And then I had an idea. Melissa's meeting was with some executives from a Korean company. I did a quick Google search, found some offensive stuff that could rub them the wrong way, subtle, but enough to cause awkwardness. I placed it smack in the middle of the presentation, hidden just enough that it wouldn't be caught until it was too late. I also threw in a few indecent images, strategically placing them toward the center of the slides, not right at the start where she'd catch it during a quick skim, but far enough in that she'd be caught off guard in the middle of her big moment. I wasn't going to ruin just her marriage. I was going to mess with her whole life. My head was still throbbing, so I popped a couple of painkillers and lay down. By the evening, I felt better, just in time for Melissa to come home. She walked in like nothing had happened, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this mess like she always did. "Sam, we need to talk," she started, her voice calm but with that edge to it that I'd come to hate. I didn't even look at her. "Go to hell, Melissa. We're getting a divorce." She didn't miss a beat. "You're a fool," she spat, crossing her arms, probably thinking I just cooled down after a while, like this was some petty argument about money or dinner plans. "We'll see who the fool is," I snapped back, standing up and heading out to the porch. I didn't have anywhere to go. Neither did she. The house was big enough for both of us, but that night it felt like a prison. There was no way I was going to sleep next to her. So I figured I'd just crash on the couch again. But as it turned out, I didn't even make it through the night at home. It was a few hours after midnight when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another spam call, but then I saw the name on the screen, Emma, Jason's daughter. I answered, my voice groggy. "Hello." At first, I couldn't make out what she was saying. Her words were slurred, jumbled. But after a minute, it became clear, she was drunk, very drunk. She'd been at some party and couldn't get home, so she called me, of all people, to pick her up. She didn't want her dad to know, and I guess I was the only one she thought she could trust. So I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and headed out. When I arrived at the address she'd given me, Emma was leaning against a wall, barely able to stand. The smell of alcohol hit me from a mile away as she stumbled toward the car. I opened the door for her, and she practically fell into the passenger seat. "What the hell, Emma?" I said, more out of concern than anger. "This isn't like you." She waved me off, her head lolling against the seat. My boyfriend, he cheated on me," she mumbled, almost crying but still with that strange smile on her face. Drunk, emotional, and confused, it was a mess. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. I knew exactly what that felt like. "You're not the only one who's been betrayed," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. She turned toward me, her drunken curiosity piqued. "Who else?" I sighed and told her, in short, about what had happened with Melissa and Jason. I didn't go into the ugly details, but it was enough for her to get the picture. "Oh, Uncle Sam," she whispered, leaning closer, her hand landing on my leg. "I'm so sorry." At first, I thought she was just being comforting, but her hand didn't stop there. It moved slowly up and down my leg, and I felt my whole body tense. "Emma, stop," I said, taking her hand and moving it away. But she didn't stop. She kept touching me, her drunken flirtation obvious now. "I want to make you feel better," she whispered, her hand wandering back to my thigh. I resisted. I really did. But the anger, the betrayal, the alcohol, it all came crashing together. I don't know when, but at some point, I stopped caring. Maybe it was revenge, maybe it was just the alcohol talking, but when she unzipped my fly and bent down, I didn't stop her. She was good. I wasn't thinking about Jason or Melissa anymore, just a moment, the twisted satisfaction of knowing I was crossing a line I could never uncross. When she was done, she leaned back and smiled, her lipstick smeared, her makeup a mess. "There's a hotel nearby," she said, her voice low and suggestive. "You don't want to go home, and neither do I." I didn't argue. We went to the hotel and spent the rest of the night in bed, doing things I never thought I'd be capable of with Emma. I was 44, but that night, age didn't seem to matter. Somehow, I kept up. In the morning, she woke me up, grinning. "Let's take a picture," she said, grabbing my phone since hers was dead. I don't know why, but I let her. She posed, her makeup smeared across her face, and I snapped the picture. Her lipstick was still on my skin. Afterward, we fell back into bed, and by morning, when the hangover hit again, reality came crashing back down. I felt like I'd crossed a point of no return. I didn't regret it, but I knew things were only going to get messier from here. When we stepped out of the hotel into the sharp morning light, it felt surreal, the kind of morning where everything should feel normal, but the weight of what had just happened hung in the air like a storm cloud. Emma was the first to break the silence, lighting a cigarette and blowing out a long stream of smoke, not a care in the world. "You know," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather, "you could show that picture to my dad." I stopped mid-step, staring at her. "What?" She took another drag, looking at me sideways with a grin that didn't match the seriousness of what she was saying. "I mean it. You could show him that picture of me. I don't give a damn anymore." I shook my head, trying to understand what the hell she was getting at. "Why the hell would you want me to do that?" Emma shrugged, still grinning, like this was some kind of game. "I've been wanting to get away from him for years. He won't let me go. Every time I even mention moving out or living my own life, he hits me with the, 'you won't survive without me.' I'm sick of it. Sam, maybe if he sees the picture, he'll finally get it. Maybe he'll let me live my life." I just stared at her, the gravity of her words sinking in. This wasn't some spoiled, rebellious thing. This was years of being under Jason's thumb, feeling trapped, suffocated by her own father. And she was willing to use me, use what we'd done, to blow her life apart if it meant she could finally escape. "I'm not going to do that," I said, but the truth was, the thought had already crossed my mind. It was just one more way to stick it to Jason, one more way to tear everything apart. "Suit yourself," she said, flicking the cigarette butt into the gutter. She didn't seem to care either way, like the consequences didn't even matter anymore. "But if you change your mind, you know where to find me." I dropped her off at her house, and we didn't say much more. The whole drive back, her words echoed in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo, the image of her makeup smeared across her face, her lipstick still staining my skin. It was like a ticking time bomb, waiting to blow everything apart. And part of me wanted that explosion. I wanted to burn every bridge, leave nothing but ashes in my wake. When I got home, I felt the tension in the air before I even walked in. Melissa's laptop was still sitting on the dining room table, a silent reminder of the revenge I'd set in motion. She had no idea what she was walking into that day, the presentation she'd been obsessing over for weeks, the one that could make or break her career. And now I'd turned it into a disaster waiting to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. Melissa came home just before dinner, slamming the door so hard it rattled the pictures on the walls. She didn't even look at me. Her face was twisted in pure, unfiltered rage. And before I could say anything, she hurled the laptop across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen shattering into pieces as it crashed to the floor. "You idiot," she screamed, her voice hoarse with anger. "You did this, didn't you?" I didn't move from my spot on the couch, just stared at her with a calmness that I didn't really feel. "Maybe." She stormed across the room, her face red, eyes wild. "You sabotaged my presentation. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I know exactly what I've done." Her hands were shaking, and for a second, I thought she might actually hit me. "They fired me, Sam. I got fired in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that means? No company is going to touch me now. I'm finished." I raised an eyebrow. "Good." Her scream was a mix of rage and desperation. She grabbed the back of a chair, throwing it to the side. "You ruined me. You've ruined everything. And for what? To get back at me? Well, you and Jason." I trailed off, letting the unspoken accusation hang in the air. Her eyes narrowed. "You think I'm sleeping with Jason?" "I don't think, Melissa." "I know." She scoffed. "You're pathetic, Sam. So blind, so naive." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'm not a cheater." She lunged at me, her nails scratching my face. "You'll pay for this, Sam. You'll pay for what you've done." I grabbed her wrists, holding her back. "Get out of my house, Melissa." "This is my house too," she screamed. "Not anymore," I said. "I'm changing the locks tomorrow." She glared at me, her eyes filled with hate. "You haven't heard the last of this, Sam," she hissed. "I'm going to make you pay for what you've done." "I'm not afraid of you, Melissa," I said. "Now get out." She yanked her arms away, storming off, slamming the door to the bedroom. And just like that, she was gone from my life, at least for the moment. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I sat back down, my mind still buzzing from everything that had happened. And that's when I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my messages until I found Jason's name. My finger hovered over the photo of Emma for just a second before I hit send. The image, her disheveled makeup, the look on her face, was now on its way to him. The final nail in the coffin. I didn't care what came next. I just wanted him to feel the pain, the betrayal, the chaos that had consumed.